And take a look at the first game on tap. Kansas City, are they a team of fate, a team of destiny? Will they be the first team to win 3 Super Bowls in a row? I know Andy Reid likes his chances real well this coming up in these playoffs here. I'm going to take it back to you, Victor. Your take on Houston and Kansas City this week. What do you see from an over-under total aspect in the game?
Well, this is the lowest total ever for Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. We're right down there at about 41 and a half. Sharp bettors know 41 is a key number in the NFL. There are many different popular scoring combinations in which a game can finish exactly on 41 points. So the odds makers have done a fantastic job, again, with the line of 41 and a half. Again, his lowest total. The previous low in the Patrick Mahomes playoff game was last year against the Dolphins, in which it was 43 and a half. That extremely cold game in Kansas City. You do remember it. Of course, Chiefs held the Dolphins to just one touchdown. That game did indeed go under the total. Uh, for me, Mark, I'm laying off the total. I am cautioning laying the points with the Chiefs. Of course, uh, from our database in the division round, home teams coming in with rest. The two division round home teams coming in with rest. That's Kansas City. That's Detroit. Both of the Saturday home teams have not done actually particularly well. 27-36 ATS since 2006. Even worse, they've gone 14-22 against the spread when they're favored by a touchdown or more, which is the case in both of these games. We know that Chiefs struggle laying the big points and have indeed done that in the last 2 or 3 seasons. So we would lean toward taking the points in the game. I know the over-under line, again, is currently right at 41 and a half. If you are going to bet the game under the total, make sure you get a 41 and a half or higher, because it could very easily go down to 41 or even less by the time we get to the Saturday kickoff, in which the weather looks doesn't look great there in Kansas City, at least clear, no precipitation, 20 to 24 degrees. But this will be the most wind-impacted game of the 4 this weekend. Winds could be anywhere in the nature of 15 to 20 miles an hour. So, again, we could have the most wind-impacted game of the 4 here on Saturday afternoon.
And Victor, we talked last week about the importance of these playoff games and what they mean and how the defense usually really surfaces in games like this. We saw an abundance of unders last week. Do you foresee that being the case with the divisional round games this week on the whole?
It's a tough round to call, Mark, but I do think we're going to get at least 2 of the 4 games going over the total this particular week. One more in regards to this game. Houston was the NFL's #1 team in the first half this season. Houston. They did it again last week. If you bet Houston in the first half of that game in their wild card win, they've gone 14-4 against the spread in the first half this season, followed by Detroit, the second best first half team. So I might consider actually grabbing the points with Houston in the first half of the game. Yeah, Kansas City's been a dynamite second half team, but again, the value may be on grabbing Houston plus 3.5 or more in the first half of this game.
Well, Victor's going under the total in that game, Kansas City-Houston, for the matchup on Saturday. Jim Feist, what do you think happens between the Chiefs and the Texans in this football game? What's your initial reaction?
Well, I do think the Texans will have a harder time with Mahomes than they did with Herbert. Basically, they that was a little gift wrapped. They played well. I give them credit for that. They have a good coach. I like their quarterback. They didn't have a great year like they had the previous year, but they came out and blew out their first round opponent like they did last year. They're an indoor team, and they're playing outdoors in cold weather. And as Victor said, most impacted by wind of any of the games this week. I like it under. And, you know, the Chiefs have played with their food all year long. They've load managed with Kelsey. It's probably his last year, probably retire. But when it comes to Spagnuolo, Reed, Mahomes, Kelsey, Pacheco, I mean, you're talking about quality. There was only about 6 teams that are quality in the NFL. The rest of the teams are marginal or bad. And the way that Houston played this year, they weren't like they were a year ago. And their defense caused some of those turnovers last week, but this is different. I like the Chiefs, but I can't like it under and lay the Chiefs too, because in order to cover big numbers, you're going to have more points. And so I'm going to go with the under as opposed to laying the Chiefs. If it wasn't for the weather, I would probably be on both. I would probably be on the Chiefs strong, but with that weather, I'm going to probably just stick with the under.
Jim says the safer side in the football game for him will be the under total. He matches up with Victor with his side in the football game. Tony Mejia, what do you think happens in this big showdown, Kansas City and Houston?
I honestly think that the weather is not going to be that big of a factor. I mean, we're looking at weather probably being more of a factor on Sunday in both of those games. So is that good for Kansas City? Certainly, historically, it would be, because Patrick Mahomes has been lights out in the divisional round. The 6-0, and the Chiefs have scored 27 or more points in 5 of those wins. And so they just saw the Texans. So, I mean, really, you're preparing for a team you saw less than a month ago. That was a big win. I think it got them to 15-1, might have been 14-1. But certainly it was a game where Mahomes played well. He threw for a score, ran for another 260 yards, completed 28 passes, and in 9 of his last 14 games, he's completed at least 26. So I think while the narrative is correct that we've seen Patrick Mahomes shine a little less bright this season, the fact that he's gotten it done to the tune that he got it done at, I think bodes well for him playing well to start. And then I also think if you're Houston, not that you come in with nothing to lose, because at this point, you can smell it, and you pulled off a great win after a really disappointing season. I think I had them as my Super Bowl dark horse, and certainly that never materialized. This is a game that is a rematch from the Tank Dell game. Obviously, Dell was having a great game at that point. It was on a Saturday afternoon, December 21st, and Dell suffered that horrific injury. We probably won't see him at all next season. Hopefully, we'll see him again in the future. But it does take a weapon away from C.J. Stroud, one of his favorite weapons, and they just cut Deontay Johnson because I guess he's such a headache that no locker room can stand him being in it, whether prosperity or not. So I'm a little leery of how Houston plans to move the ball here, but I also think you're not going to beat the Chiefs 13-9. So I think there's going to be letting Stroud let it rip. He's had interceptions in the last 3 games he's played. So I think this is a case where the over is my play, slightly into the Chiefs on laying the points. And I love Joe Mixon over 15.5 rushing attempts. He ran 25 times against the Chargers. And I think if you want to stay in it early and you want to keep some pressure off Stroud, you hand the ball to Mixon and see what he can do. And even in the second half, if you're down, Mixon will get some carries. So really a low total, 15.5 for Joe Mixon rushing attempts.
Player props and sides from Tony Mejia in this football game. There'll be a lot of eyeballs in this contest. It's Kansas City defending champions. They took that embarrassing loss when they laid everybody down. I think they played practice players against Denver when they were beat 38-0. I don't know what that'll mean to the team. All I know is that they have their eye on the prize, and that's the Super Bowl, winning the Super Bowl here this upcoming football season. Andy Iskoe, what do you think happens between these two AFC teams?
Well, it's interesting because last year, after beating Cleveland, Houston went to Baltimore and got soundly defeated. So they have that feeling. Last year was an inexperienced team. They may have been really elated about winning that game, but now they want to take another step. Now, of course, to take that other step, they're going to have to beat Kansas City. Well, as Tony pointed out, these teams played each other just less than a month ago. It was the 21st of December. That was a very competitive game. In fact, early in the third quarter, down 17-10, Houston scored a touchdown in the early part of the third quarter. They missed the extra point, so they were down 17-16. The Chiefs scored at the end of the third quarter, about 2 minutes left to go, up 24-16. The Houston scored a field goal in the fourth quarter to make it 24-19, and then Kansas City got the last field goal to make the final score 27-9, so 27-19. So I can see. Oh, by the way, in that game there were only 2 turnovers, and they were both on Houston, as Stroud had 2 interceptions in that game. So I can give Houston an opportunity. We keep waiting for the Chiefs to roll, and they had a couple of nice wins late in the year. I put absolutely 0. In fact, I ignore that 38-0 loss to Denver. It means absolutely nothing. But if you go back to that first game on the 21st, I think Kansas City had already clinched the division, and Houston was still in a battle with Indianapolis for the AFC South title. They ended up losing that game, but it was an important game, and they played well against the team on the road at Kansas City, against a team that they figured if they were going to make it to the AFC Championship game or to the Super Bowl, they at some point would have to face Kansas City, because it was extremely unlikely, even though Indianapolis was alive heading into the last week or 2 of the season, it was very unlikely that anyone from the AFC South would earn a wild card. So I give Houston a lot of credit. I think they have confidence, not just from last week because they had played a very hot Charger team, but from the experience of last year. So I don't know how strong of a play it'll be, but I also do agree on the under in this game, because I think the strength of Houston is more their defense than their offense. And because of the decline in the offense this year for Kansas City, you have to say that the defense of Kansas City is almost as much of a strength for them as their offense has been in the past for the Chiefs.
Greg DePalma, we're hearing a lot of under talk here in this around the table with the experts to begin here on this contest here. Are you liking a side or a total in this football game?
No, I'm not a total guy, and I'm definitely not going to go up against any of these experts. If they say the under is the play, then I'm going to play the under. But as far as the game, yeah, it's a lot of points to give up. I don't like giving up a lot of points. I'm just going to look at the fact that experience has shown that the Chiefs, they don't really blow out many teams. I know it's the playoffs, so things are a little bit different. The stakes are a little bit higher. I think it'll matter a little bit more for them to try to put the game away if they can earlier. So look, it's probably not a game I'm going to touch. If I did, I'd take the Chiefs. I'm not betting against the Chiefs. The Chiefs, as we talked about last week, that's definitely my pick. And I just don't like the way Houston's played all season. They just haven't played well consistently. The defense bailed them out last week. There was no question about it, whether or not you want to say it was, and I look at it like most things. I think it was a mixture of both. They played really good defense and Herbert was terrible. So that combination, is not going to happen this week, because Patrick Mahomes is not going to normally play terrible when the game counts. If he does, then watch out for the Houston Texans. But I think history and logic says that that Mahomes will come through, and I just don't like how Houston's going to be able to put up enough points to overcome the Chiefs. I think the one thing they do have an advantage on possibly is that we know their offensive line, the Chiefs, is not really the best, especially on the outside. They've got great players, but they've got a major issue on the outside, and that is something that Houston might be able to take advantage of.
Just a quick note to piggyback on Mahomes in this round: 6-0, 16 touchdowns, no picks, 1,813 yards.
Whoa.
So
I'm not betting against that.
That's not bad, exactly.
Yeah.
You can't. How can you fade that, especially with the football team that's mad, angry, and focused?
Yeah. How about you, Mark? What do you?
I think this game's got blowout written all over it on the Kansas City side. What you're doing here is you're taking an advantage, I think, of a Houston Texan team that won an opportunistic game when they were installed as home underdogs. Sort of a slap in the face. They stepped up. They answered that challenge. Now they're going to take out onto the road. And I'm going to share this with our listeners out there. This is from our playbook preview guide, or our playbook playoff guide, I should say, football newsletter this particular week. And it involves teams in the division round who won straight up as a home underdog the first round, and now they take onto the road in the next game. Since 1984, these teams are 1-16 straight up and 2-15 to the spread.
No.
Whoa.
They just get smoked. And this is the kind of a game where I could see Kansas City smoking somebody. And I think here comes the perfect lamb, if you will, in the Houston Texans in this football game. You look at CJ Stroud. He's not been able to step up against quality teams in 5 games in his career against 750 or better opponents. or 700 or better opponents. He's 1-4 straight up and against the spread. This is the game that I think Patrick Mahomes wants more than any to start this playoff season because it gets this team on a roll, and that's what I think will happen here. I like Kansas City to roll in this football game.
And again, that was did you say 1-15, Mark, straight up?
It's 1-16 straight up and 2-15 to the spread
And that is that are wild card upset winners
as a home underdog,
as a home underdog.
and not taking out onto the road in the divisional round.
And by the way, this is important because if you're somebody out there that is just a novice gambler, you're just starting to do it for the first time, and you're trying to figure out the best way of, doing things and taking your heart out of it. This is something that I would think that if you're a young gambler, if you wagered, say, on Houston, and they went ahead and won a lot of money for you, and you're all excited about it, it's very hard for those young gamblers to go against them the very next week. That's something that was always hard for me. I remember that because they won me money. Let me go on them again the next week, and then I wound up losing all my money back. So I think that's important for anybody out there. That's why you can't bet with your heart.
One of the important things, and it sort of is in line with what you say, Greg, and even though it was a win last week, these are the playoffs. These are when the teams who have been sort of struggling throughout the season will find out. We'll find out this week if Kansas City, and they may win the game, but let's see if Kansas City struggles throughout the season, evidence themselves here, because this is a game where you can make a case that, okay, we're going to see the Kansas City team that we've seen the last few years in the playoffs, because the playoff intensity is a lot greater, even if you faced a team recently. I still think Houston is decent enough to give Kansas City a game, but it could be entirely different because these are the playoffs.
Remember, this Kansas City team was playing their best football of the season going to the last week when they decided to rest their regulars. They had won 6 games pretty convincingly, unlike their earlier wins when they went undefeated and were winning games by 1-score margins. So they were beginning to become a real
they did have that close call against the Raiders that they should have lost at the end at home. So
what do you think, Mark? What would your advice be if, let's say, because I'm assuming this is going to also work against the Rams. So if, let's say, Houston covers and it's the first game, it starts the weekend, what do you say to anybody then that is thinking about the Ram game? Because I could also see a situation where, let's say, the Rams cover. I don't know. Do you put like an asterisk in it because they weren't really a home dog? I mean, they were like a neutral site dog.
It was definitely a neutral site game because you could hear the Minnesota fans were equally as vocal. So it was technically, it was essentially a home game that they deserved, but clearly it was. I mean, I don't know how you handicap it, Mark, but I handicap this. I handicap the game Monday night as clearly a neutral site game.
Yep, same here.
Victor, let me ask you, and I know I pretty much do too as well. In our database, we have 4 statistical categories: home favorite, home dog, road favorite. Do we have a designated home dog?
In that game, I totally agree with Andy. We counted that as a neutral site playoff game in our database.
Right.
Okay.
Haven't been many of those, right? Outside of the Super Bowl.
Right.
I'm glad to hear that because I like the Rams.
Nasty angle against the Rams coming up when we get to that game.
Yeah.
I want to ask you this question, Mark, and Victor as well. Games in London. Do you count those as neutral site games or road games for both teams? I count them as neutral sites.
Neutral site regular season games. Yes,
for both teams.
Mm-hmm.
And one last thing, because I guess I am the lone contrarian on this over. But again, I'm not to play it much at all. Like I think Houston will have to get maybe a garbage time touchdown there because I'm more inclined to lay with the Chiefs than ride with the over. But we do have to respect that Patrick Mahomes off an ankle injury has now had weeks to heal, and Andy Reid gets in the lab with last time we've seen them actually out there, it's been a month. He's got Hopkins. He's got Hollywood Brown now healthy. He's got all these weapons. So, I mean, we should see them. And I think this is the key to the over-under angle on this game. They've sputtered in the red zone, at least early on in the season, to keep teams in games. I hopefully we see, a couple of trick plays that will result in 6 instead of 3.
Yeah, Tony's not wrong. They just played a few weeks ago, like you mentioned. It was 27-19. The game went over the total. Houston got to 19 points in the game. They're going to need to get to 17 or more for the game for the over to cash. So again, he's not wrong. They just played a few weeks ago. This is Patrick Mahomes' first game since Christmas Day, isn't it, guys? It's been that long since Patrick Mahomes actually played a game, right?
Yeah, he's been playing with his newborn child here. His wife had a third baby. Their names are really kind of funky names.
I saw them. What was it? Is it Sterling, Bronze, and what's the other one? Bronze is the new one, and Sterling was the first one, and the other one's in the same theme, but it escapes me right now.
Yeah, they're all like named after metals of some kind. You know?
At least it's not peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah,
I was gonna say
exactly.
maybe bullion.